Shalom, this is your brother Raphael Yesharan, and the objective of this video is to take a look at the principle of an eye for an eye and juxtapose it to the mandate that we are given in the scriptures to love one another, which the scriptures are clear is of the utmost importance. The reason many of us, or I should say probably all of us, can find it hard to love one another properly is because we live in a world that is fallen due to sin, and people are fallible. We are all fallible people. We have misunderstandings between each other. We make misjudgments. People make miscalculations. Someone can say something to someone, meaning it one way, but depending on the mental state of the person they're talking to, the person they're talking to can take what they said to mean something totally different. You can do something for one reason, but someone, because of their mental state and point of view, can misconstrue your motives. People have character flaws and varying personality traits. These are some of the obstacles that stand in our way from us loving one another properly. People's cognitive abilities and comprehension skills also vary widely. So to overcome all of this, the Most High gave us precepts to guide us in how we are to deal with one another in a righteous manner, which we're going to touch on in this video. Leviticus 24, verse 19. It says, "And if a man cause a blemish in his neighbor, as he hath done, so shall it be done to him." So whatever he's done, that's what's done to him. It says, "Breach for breach, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. As he hath caused a blemish in a man, so shall it be done to him again." That means whatever harm you cause to someone else, that exact thing has to be done to you. Now, some read this and they get the idea, and they do have the idea still, that this means that if someone does some harm to you, that you are able to take it upon yourself and go and get revenge on them. And that is the idea that you may get if you just read this at face value without any understanding. So we have to get more understanding on this. The way we get understanding is through precepts. Isaiah 28 verse 9 says, "Whom shall he teach knowledge?" That's a question. Speaking about the Most High, whom shall he teach knowledge? And whom shall he make to understand doctrine? That's the question. Who's going to understand the doctrine in these scriptures? It says, "Them that are weaned from the milk and drawn from the breast." As we know, as children, as babies, we drink milk from our mother's breast until we are weaned from the milk and can then handle solid foods. And as far as the scriptures are concerned, the milk would be the basic commandments in the Torah, the principles that are being taught to you in the Torah, the mindset that the Torah is teaching you to have. That's the milk. And once you understand the commandments, once you understand the statutes, once you understand the principles of the Torah and what's going on in the Torah, you have a foundation to build upon. Once you have those basic commandments and principles down pat. And it says, "For precept must be upon precept, precept upon precept." And what is a precept? A precept is a commandment. That's what that is. Because sometimes I hear people using this incorrectly, quoting or paraphrasing this verse incorrectly in the improper context. It just means commandment. So you have to go commandment on commandment. And it says line upon line, line upon line. That means you're reading it in the context. You're reading the lines above it, the lines below it, everything that's in the context, so that you can understand what's being said to you. And it says here a little and there a little. So you want to take a commandment from one part of the Torah and put it with a commandment from another part of the Torah, and it'll help you get an understanding, a full understanding of what is being conveyed. And it says, for with stammering lips and another tongue will he speak to this people. So we know that the Most High speaks to his people through various languages. To whom he said, this is the rest wherewith ye may cause the weary to rest, and this is the refreshing. Yet they would not hear. So his commandments are the rest, and they are the refreshing. His word that he gives to us. But it says, yet they would not hear. See, Israel would not hear. That's the legacy of Israel to this day. And it says, but the word of the Lord was unto them precept upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line, here a little and there a little, that they might go and fall backward and be broken and snared and taken. That's what happens when you will not hear the word of the Most High. When you hear the word of the Most High, but you won't listen. You won't obey it. You won't hearken to it. That's what happens. You fall into destruction. And that's what has happened to the children of Israel. So we're going to go precept upon precept and get an understanding of what Leviticus 24, 19 through 20 is specifically telling us. Let's read it again. Leviticus 24 verse 19 says, and if a man cause a blemish in his neighbor, as he hath done, so shall it be done to him. Breach for breach, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, as he has caused a blemish in a man, so shall it be done to him again. And the verses above this and the verses below this don't explain this verse, which is why we have to go to other parts of the Torah for precepts. Leviticus 19 verse 17, because again, we could surmise from what we just read that a man is to go get vengeance, take it upon himself, and go get revenge on someone if they do something evil or wrong to them. In Leviticus 19:17, it says, thou shalt not hate thy brother in thine heart. Thou shalt in any wise rebuke thy neighbor and not suffer sin upon him. So it's a sin to harbor hatred for your brother in your heart. And you shall rebuke your neighbor and not suffer sin upon him, which is to say, if you see your neighbor sinning, you're supposed to let him know so that hopefully he can turn from that sin. And we're going to define who your neighbor is in this video, because that's another thing that people have different understandings on. So we're going to see who is your neighbor in this video. It says in verse 18, thou shalt not avenge nor bear any grudge against the children of thy people, but thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. I am the Lord. It says thou shalt not avenge. We just read that it was eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, whatsoever a man do against his neighbor, that's going to be done to him again. Yet here it's saying, you shall not avenge. So at face value, that would appear to be contradictory, which is why we have to continue to get precepts for more understanding. Let's go to Exodus 21. In verse 22, it says, if men strive, meaning they fight, and hurt a woman with child, so two men are fighting and they hurt a woman that's pregnant, it says, so that her fruit depart from her, so she miscarries, the baby comes out because she was hurt. It says, and yet no mischief follow, he shall be surely punished according as the woman's husband will lay upon him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. So two men are fighting, a woman ends up getting hurt, and it says, yet no mischief follow, which means after she gets hurt and the child comes out, nothing else bad happened. It says, he shall surely be punished according as the woman's husband will lay upon him. So judges are going to make the final determination, but he shall let them know how much of a recompense he wants. And it says, and he shall pay as the judges determine. And it says in verse 23, and if any mischief follow, then thou shalt give life for life. So eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burning for burning, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. What we need to understand from here is that it says, according as the woman's husband will lay upon him. So he has some say into whether or not he wants to press charges, so to speak. And it says, and he shall pay as the judges determine. The man doesn't go and take it upon himself to get vengeance on his neighbor. That's not how that works lawfully. The judges have to make that determination. The punishment could also be a fine. That's why Flavius Josephus, who lived in Israel and was an Israelite in the 1st century AD, which is the same century that Christ and the apostles lived, he said, he that kicks a woman with child so that the woman miscarry, let him pay a fine in money, as the judges shall determine, as having diminished the multitude by the destruction of what was in her womb. And let money also be given the woman's husband by him that kicked her. But if she die of the stroke, let him also be put to death, the law judging it equitable that life should go for life. And I'm going to skip down, and he says, he that maimeth anyone, let him undergo the like himself. So that means if you hurt somebody, the same needs to be done to you. He says, and be deprived of the same member of which he hath deprived the other. Which is to say, if you made somebody lose a finger, you should lose a finger. Again, though, it's going to be up to the judges. He says, unless he that is maimed will accept money instead of it. For the law makes the sufferer the judge of the value of what he hath suffered, and permits him to estimate it, unless he will be more severe. And that's why we read that the man who caused the woman to miscarry is charged based on charges her husband wants to press on him. But it's still up to the judges. That's why here in Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 16, it says, if a false witness rise up against any man to testify against him that which is wrong, then both the men between whom the controversy is shall stand before the Lord, before the priests and the judges, which shall be in those days. It says, and the judges shall make diligent inquisition, and behold, if the witness be a false witness, and hath testified falsely against his brother, then shall ye do unto him as he had thought to have done unto his brother. So shalt thou put away evil from among you. So if a false witness rises up against a man and wants to bring false charges on him, it says the judges shall make diligent inquisition. You understand that? It says he's going to stand before the Lord, before the priests and the judges. And then it says that if he's found out to be a false witness, you shall do unto him as he has thought to have done unto his brother. So it's the judges who make the determination. It's illegal for him to take it upon himself to get vengeance on someone. It says, and those which remain shall hear and fear, and shall henceforth commit no more any such evil among you, and thine eye shall not pity, but life shall go for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. That's the understanding when you are talking about eye for an eye. You have to first go before the judges, and they will make that determination. As Deuteronomy chapter 25 verse 1 says, if there be a controversy between men, and they come unto judgment, that the judges may judge them, then they shall justify the righteous and condemn the wicked. That's why Messiah said in Matthew 5 verse 38, he said, you have heard it hath been said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. The reason he says you have heard that it has been said is because people would quote parts of the law and isolate them and turn them into their own standalone saying. And they would use it for their own nefarious purposes. So he said, you have heard that, but I say unto you, that ye resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if any man will sue thee at the law, and take away thy coat, let him have thy cloak also. So he's saying, if someone is trying to do evil to you, don't resist the evil. Don't even try to get them back. But let them do whatever evil they're doing to you, because the Most High, as we're going to get into this video, through Christ is going to bring judgment on all evildoers. Now, he's not saying that it's wrong to defend yourself or to defend the lives of your family members. You got to remember, this is the same man who told his disciples, it's the time for, if you don't have a sword, to sell your clothes and buy a sword. So that's not what he's saying. The point of what he's saying is that it's not up to us to bring judgment on other people or to try to stop them from doing evil. It's our job to shine the light and to be righteous and to be the salt of the earth. When people see that they're doing you wrong, but you're doing good to them, you're not trying to get them back, they see that you have a light in you. And we know that that light comes from Christ and his word. The law of the Most High actually teaches us how to love. The modern Christian church rejects the law because it wasn't given to them. They reject the law, unlike the apostles and those who actually followed the teachings of the apostles. They say things like nobody can keep all of those laws, or 613 laws, quote unquote. These are the type of things that they say. When just in America alone, there are thousands of laws. There are over 3,000 laws in America alone. Yet they say that there are too many laws in the Torah. Not only that, but you wouldn't have to keep every law in the Torah. If you had some understanding, you would know this, because there are laws that are for agriculture. There are laws that are only for men. There are laws that are only for women. There are laws that are only for children. There are laws that are only for specific circumstances, for the temple, etc. So if you actually used your brain, you wouldn't even say things like that. But when people are inundated with a message over and over again, they are brainwashed by it, and then they repeat it to other people, and it becomes a snowball effect. But that's another story. That's actually a different video. Here, Exodus 21 and verse 18, it says, and if men strive together, that means fight, and one smite another with a stone or with his fist, and he die not, but keepeth his bed. So that's if men are fighting, if two men are fighting, for example, and one is beating up another one with his fist, but the man who he beat up did not die, it says, but keepeth his bed, which is to say he's bedridden, or he's confined to his bed. He's hurt, but he's not dead. Verse 19 says, if he rise again and walk abroad upon his staff, then shall he that smote him be quit. So if the man rises again and is able to walk, the man that beat him up will be considered innocent. It says, only he shall pay for the loss of his time. So he has to pay for the loss of this man's time. An example of that would be if this man couldn't work for a week because he was hurt so bad, you have to pay this man's salary for that week. That's an example of what it means to pay for the loss of someone's time. It says, and shall cause him to be thoroughly healed. It's your responsibility, if you beat up this man, to make sure he's thoroughly healed. You have to be a caretaker for him. You understand that? These are the type of things that the law teaches us. As I said, we're going to answer the question, who is thy neighbor? And we're going to get this answer from the master teacher himself, Yahshua HaMashiach. In Luke chapter 10, it says in verse 25, and behold, a certain lawyer stood up and tempted him, saying, Master, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? He said unto him, what is written in the law? How readest thou? So Yahshua referred him to the law. That's very important. And he answering said, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy strength, and with all thy mind. Where did he get this from? He got this from the law. You understand that? He's paraphrasing Deuteronomy 6 verse 5, which says, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy might. And then he says, and thy neighbor as thyself. Where did he get that from? We already read it earlier. Leviticus 19 says, thou shalt not avenge nor bear any grudge against the children of thy people, but shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. I am the Lord. He got that from the law. And what did Hamashiach say to him? And he said unto him, thou hast answered right. This do, and thou shalt live. And why did he answer correctly? Because loving the Most High with all thy heart, soul, strength, and mind, and thy neighbor as thyself, is the summary of the law. It's the substance of the law. That's what you're supposed to be learning. And verse 28 says, and he said unto him, thou hast answered right, this do, and thou shalt live. But he, talking about the lawyer, willing to justify himself, said unto Jesus, and who is my neighbor? And that's an important question, because it says he was willing to justify himself. So he wants to know exactly who his neighbor is. And that's what we need an answer on, in clarity, because there's differing answers on this question as well. But let's see the answer that the master teacher gives us. And Jesus answering said, a certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho. So he was originally in Jerusalem, and he went to Jericho, and he fell among thieves, which stripped him of his raiment and wounded him and departed, leaving him half dead. So he got beat and robbed. It says, and by chance there came down a certain priest that way, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. And we know that the priests are the sons of Aaron, which are supposed to be the holiest men of Israel, because they are the ones who do the work in the temple and stand in the gap between the sins of the people and the Most High. So the man that's supposed to be holy and set apart, even from a set apart people, which is Israel, he's even set apart from them. He's so set apart. He just passed by on the other side and left them. And it says, and likewise the Levite, when he was at that place, came and looked on him and passed by on the other side. And we know that priests are Levites, but not all Levites are priests. So again, the Levite, who is supposed to be a holy man, he's not a priest, but he's still a Levite. He's still set apart as well. He passed by on the other side. It says, but a Samaritan, a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion on him. So the Samaritan is the one that had compassion on this man that went from Jerusalem to Jericho. And for those of us who don't know, after King Solomon's reign, the kingdom of Judah and Israel were split into two kingdoms, and there was often strife between the two kingdoms. And this was accentuated by the fact that the Assyrians took some of the Israelites of the northern kingdom out of the northern kingdom, and they took heathen and put them in the northern kingdom of Israel. And the heathen that were put in the northern kingdom of Israel stayed there and amalgamated into the northern kingdom of Israel, which furthered the division between Judah and Israel, in the sense that some of the Judeans began to look at the Samaritans as not Israel, because, like I just said, the Samaritans had people of other nations who lived amongst them and who ended up blending with them. So there was a divide between Judah and Israel. But he says this Samaritan, he saw the man and had compassion on him. And as I just said, many of those in Judah looked at the Samaritans, because Samaria is the capital of the northern kingdom of Israel. They looked at them like they're not even Israel sometimes. And it says, and went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring in oil and wine, and set him on his own beast, and brought him to an inn and took care of him. So the Samaritan took care of this man from Jerusalem, brought him to an inn and took good care of him, bound up his wounds. It says, and on the morrow when he departed, so when he left the inn the next day, he took out 2 pence, and gave them to the host, and said unto him, Take care of him, and whatsoever thou spendest more, when I come again, I will repay thee. So this man not only took him to the inn, but he gave the man at the inn money and said, Take care of this man, and if you spend more than what I gave you, if you need more money, he said, when I come again, I will repay thee. So he said, I'm going to come back and pay you for whatever you spent over, what we agreed. That's how well he took good care of this man. And so Christ asked the question, which now of these three thinkest thou was neighbor unto him that fell among thieves? Now, if you're paying attention, you will see that Christ is changing the perspective of the question. Because the lawyer asked him, who is my neighbor? Yet Christ is asking him, which of these three was neighbor unto him that fell among thieves? Which is to say that his neighbor was the man that treated him well. That was his neighbor. And that's exactly what he said in verse 37. He said, he that showed mercy on him. Then said Jesus unto him, Go and do thou likewise. That means go and show mercy on other people, and they are your neighbor. Do you understand that? The answer to his question of who is my neighbor, the answer is whoever you show mercy to. That's your neighbor. That's why he said, and he said unto him, he that showed mercy on him. Then Jesus said, Go and do likewise. You understand that? So his neighbor wasn't the Levite in this situation. His neighbor wasn't the priest. His neighbor was the man that showed him mercy. The man that treated him with love and compassion. That was his neighbor. Not the man who is the most respected and authoritative Israelite. That wasn't his neighbor. It's the man that showed him love. That was his neighbor. So that's the answer to the question. Your neighbor is who you show love to. So Christ gave him a proper perspective on the question of who is my neighbor. Go out and show love to people, regardless of their status, regardless of their pedigree, and they are your neighbor. You showed love. As far as how the saints are supposed to treat their enemies, Proverbs 24 verse 29 says, Say not, I will do so to him as he hath done to me. I will render to the man according to his work. So don't say that I'm going to get vengeance on somebody that done something wrong to me. Proverbs 25 says in verse 21, If thy enemy be hungry, give him bread to eat, and if he be thirsty, give him water to drink. That's what you do to your enemy. That's the type of love that the scriptures teach. It say, For thou shalt heap coals of fire upon his head, and the Lord shall reward thee. Matthew chapter 5 verse 43 says, Ye have heard that it hath been said, Thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thy enemy. You see, Christ didn't say it is written. He said, you have heard that it have been said. This is something that people say and repeat because they take laws and they twist them to their own destruction. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. And this is exactly what the law is teaching us. when you have understanding of it. Exodus chapter 23 says in verse 4, if thou meet thy enemy's ox or his ass going astray, thou shalt surely bring it back to him again. Now, if you see your enemy's ox or you see his ass wandering about, you know that in your carnal heart and your carnal mind, you do not want to waste or spend your time and your effort bringing it back to him, going and grabbing it and bringing it back to him, spending all that time, putting forth all that effort for somebody who is your enemy. You don't want to do that. But the law says that that's what you have to do. Why? It's teaching you how to love one another. It's teaching you how to be merciful. It says, if thou see the ass of him that hated thee lying under his burden, and wouldest forbear to help him, thou shalt surely help with him. So if you see his ass lying under his burden, laying down under everything he's supposed to be carrying, and you don't want to help him, you don't have time for that. Matter of fact, you might be secretly glad that this is happening because that's your enemy. You're glad he's having problems. He says, thou shalt surely help him. That's what the law says. And so if you don't do it, you're a transgressor of the law. 1 Corinthians 14 verse 20 says, brethren, be not children in understanding, howbeit in malice be ye children, but in understanding be men. So have a good understanding. Have a deep and a meaningful and profound understanding. Not a shallow and vain understanding of the scriptures. He says, howbeit in malice be ye children. What does that mean? When I was a child, I used to get into fist fights with my friends sometimes. And right after the fist fight, as soon as we calmed down, we were friends again. We were taking care of each other again. We were loving each other again right after the fist fight. That's how it was when I was a child. So in malice be ye children. As adults, hey, somebody says something that we don't like, we don't want to talk to them ever again. Ecclesiasticus chapter 28, also known as Sirach. Chapter 28 says in verse 1, he that revengeth shall find vengeance from the Lord, and he will surely keep his sins in remembrance. So if you get revenge, you're going to get vengeance from the Most High. It says, forgive thy neighbor the hurt that he hath done unto thee, so shall thy sins also be forgiven when thou prayest. It says, one man beareth hatred against another, and doth he seek pardon from the Lord? So you hate another man, you hate your neighbor, and yet you seeking pardon from the Most High? That doesn't make sense. If you can't forgive another human, why do you think the Most High should forgive you? Isn't that a double standard? He says, he showeth no mercy to a man which is like himself, and doth he ask forgiveness of his own sins? Isn't that hypocritical? You show no mercy to another man, but yet you want the Most High to forgive you. That's not right. It says, if he that is but flesh nourish hatred, who will entreat for pardon of his sins? So these questions are rhetorical. If you nourish hatred, who's going to entreat for pardon of your sins? And the answer to that question is nobody. It says, remember thy end and let enmity cease. Remember corruption and death and abide in the commandments. So remember your end. Remember what's going to happen at the end. You're going to die. You're going to go back to dust. And you're going to have to face judgment for any wickedness and evil that you've done, especially if you've died in your sins and in your hatred for one another. So he says, abide in the commandments, remember the commandments, and bear no malice to thy neighbor. Remember the covenant of the highest, and wink at ignorance. You may say to yourself, well, I understand that we aren't to take it upon ourselves to presumptuously go and get vengeance on someone who does us harm, but we're supposed to take it to the judges. So you may say to yourself, where are the judges? And the answer is, we are not living in the time of the judges anymore, because we are not in ancient Israel as the people of the book anymore. And we know that the reason for that is because of the disobedience of our own ancestors. However, right now is a period of grace, but the judgment will come. The Most High is going to judge all people. Everyone who does wickedness will be rewarded for their wickedness. Everyone who dies in their sins will be judged for that. You don't have to be concerned about that. The Most High is the one who is the final judge through Christ. He's going to judge the world through his Son. Deuteronomy 32 verse 35 says, to me belongeth vengeance and recompense. That's who it belongs to. It belongs to the Most High. Their foot shall slide in due time, for the day of their calamity is at hand, and the things that shall come upon them make haste. To the Most High belongeth vengeance and recompense. Psalms 96 says in verse 10, say among the heathen that the Lord reigneth. The world also shall be established, that it shall not be moved. He shall judge the people righteously. Let the heavens rejoice, and let the earth be glad. Let the sea roar, and the fullness thereof. Let the field be joyful, and all that is therein. Then shall all the trees of the wood rejoice. So everybody should be happy. Everyone who is righteous and doing that which is righteous and virtuous should be happy. It says, before the Lord, for he cometh to judge the earth. He shall judge the world with righteousness, and the people with his truth. Like I already said, the Most High is going to judge everyone. He's going to bring judgment on this world, and he's going to do it through his only begotten Son. Psalms 98 verse 8 through 9 says, let the floods clap their hands, let the hills be joyful together before the Lord, for he cometh to judge the earth. With righteousness shall he judge the world, and the people with equity. Romans 7:17 says, recompense to no man evil for evil, as we went over earlier. Provide things honest in the sight of all men. If it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. That's what we as the saints try to do. If at all possible, we want to have peace with everybody. Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves. You see that? Avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. Therefore, if thy enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him drink, for in so doing thou shalt heap coals of fire on his head. Which is to say, you're going to hurt him even more by treating him good, even though he treated you evil. That's going to hurt him even more. 1 Corinthians 4 verse 5 says, therefore judge nothing before the time until the Lord come, who both will bring to light the hidden things of darkness and will make manifest the counsels of the heart. Don't judge anything before the time. When the Lord comes, he's the one that's going to do this. And it says, and then shall every man have praise of God. John 5:22 says, for the Father judgeth no man, but have committed all judgment unto the Son. As I said, the Father is going to judge through his Son, because they are one, which is to say they are in agreement. His Son is the judge. HaMashiach is the one who's going to judge this world. He's going to come and he's going to bring judgment on this world physically, as far as killing a large portion of the people that are on the earth. Plagues are going to fall on the earth. And when all is said and done, there's going to be a great white throne judgment where people are going to be judged for their sins and thrown in the lake of fire. So Christ is the one who's going to bring on the judgment. Acts 17:30 says, and the times of this ignorance God winked at, but now commanded all men everywhere to repent, because he hath appointed a day in the which he will judge the world in righteousness by that man whom he hath ordained, whereof he hath given assurance unto all men, in that he hath raised him from the dead. He's going to judge by that man whom he hath ordained, Yahshua HaMashiach. Acts 10:42 says, and he commanded us to preach unto the people and to testify that it is he which was ordained of God to be the judge of the quick and the dead. And the he is Christ. 2 Corinthians 5:10 says, for we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that everyone may receive the things done in his body, according to that he hath done, whether it be good or bad. And I'm going to leave you with that. Shalom.